Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 9.6 patch notes in depth. So thank you very much for tuning in. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content on this channel. There aren't many other channels out there that give good quality, in-depth content for a variety of things in League of Legends, so just a couple of button clicks really helps out a ton. Also, stop by the stream sometime if you haven't ever done that before. We stream most nights starting around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We go till about 1:30 or 2 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'd love to have you. I try to be as conversational as possible, even while I'm in a game. I'll answer any questions that you have, and we have an awesome, really chill, friendly community that would love to have you be a part of it. So stop by sometime. It'll be a great time. And then we also have other guides and tier lists that are coming out soon. So I'm doing the patch notes here. I'll also have a support tier list, an AD carry tier list, and probably a jungle tier list coming out over the next couple of days as well. And I have a variety of topical guides like best one-trick videos, does luck exist in League of Legends, how to macro better, how to micro better, all sorts of stuff on the channel. So be sure to check all of that out. Leave some comments. Let me know what you think. And with that said, let's go ahead and get in here. Okay. So I have been on a roll with a lot of predictions. I just want to say that first of all in these patch notes. I predicted that Blade the Ruined King, Rageblade Kayle would be something that would be very good. Everyone's doing that now. Before, people had started doing like traditional AP Kayle builds like Lichbane and Nashor's Tooth and stuff like that. But people are starting to figure out that Blade plus Gensus is really good. People are now learning that Klepto on Draven is really good, which is another thing that I was recommending in the last few videos. Remember how I said that Conquer was absolute trash and that Press the Attack was not a good substitute and Draven should really start doing Klepto? Well, now they are, 2 weeks later. And then the on-hit Neeko was a thing that blew up as well. People were asking me on stream when I was playing that a couple weeks ago. They're like, why are you playing that? What is that troll build? Well, you know, week and a half later, everybody figured it out that it's really, really good. So I didn't invent these things, but I try to spread that information to you. I try to help you be, you know, on the first lines there before stuff gets banned or before there are all these all caps videos. And I think I've been on a roll lately. I don't get a lot of it right, but I just want to throw that out there, that a lot of these kind of wacky sort of off-meta things that I've predicted would be pretty strong have actually come to fruition lately. So I'm going to give you, I've got a couple more wacky ones as we go down that I'm going to predict, and we'll see if it pans out. But I try to give you the scoop, not just the 10-minute all caps video. Anyways, okay, Kayle is getting base stats nerfed, attack speed growth nerfed a little bit. I don't think this is a huge deal. She's already a powerhouse at level 16, so really this is not going to matter that much. As long as they don't hurt her early game too much or nerf her late game too much, it's probably not going to matter. Default adaptive is attack damage, which is actually really good for her laning phase. So that's almost a wash. This like helps her early game out, I believe, and this is going to hurt her late game a little bit. But, like, really, the attack speed, an extra 0.5%, it's like when she gets to, you know, level 10, she's going to lose 5% attack speed off of that. It's like, who cares? It's not going to matter that much. Celestial now scales a little bit less with ability power, which is fine because you're not going to be getting a lot of ability power with this build. I mean, you'll get some, like with her optimal build, but you're not going like full AP Kayle, so not a huge deal. Now, this is a very big deal here. Applies its effects instantly, so you don't have that 0.25 second cast. That is huge. That's going to allow you and your ally, whoever you heal, to be much faster, much quicker. It's going to be a lot more responsive. And this is a huge thing as well. You basically disarmed yourself during that animation. So you disarmed yourself for about 1 second. And it could be canceled by spamming right click. But for most people, this was going to be a disarm for 1 second. That's huge. That means you're going to get off like 1.5 attacks in the late game. I mean, this is probably one of the biggest buffs on here that you could give her. I mean, that's basically saying this ability does an extra like 300 damage or something, because you once again would have to be sacrificing at least one of those auto attacks late game. So that's a massive, massive buff for her. This definitely makes up for whatever this nerf is supposed to be up here, for sure. Now this, I'm not sure about the exact like thing here, but I assume that's probably similar. It can crit, although you're not going to get a lot of crit on her. I mean, you can get Hurricane in the late game, so maybe that, if you don't want to get Wits in, but that'll be okay. So ultimately, I think this is actually a buff to Kayle. Like, they're trying to say that this is not, but I think this is actually a buff, and quite a large buff. Like, this is a very, very big deal, especially later on in the game. So I think she's pretty good right now. People were terrible on her early, but remember I said that she had the potential to be good. People just had to figure out how to build her, and I said people needed to go Blade the Ruined King into Gensus and go Klepto on her. People were messing around with lethal tempo and Lich Bane and all this other crap, and now a lot of people are doing, once again, exactly what I said they should do. They figured it out, and now she's getting a much, much higher win rate. Now here it still says that people are going lethal tempo. But as you can see, the pros are going Klepto. So a lot of the hoi polloi out there, a lot of the masses are still getting suckered into lethal tempo builds. But I'm telling you, Klepto is the way to go. As I reiterated last time, there are a couple of reasons for Klepto. Number one, Klepto is really, really strong in the laning phase. So if you have a champion that can abuse Klepto, it just gets you through the laning phase, especially if you're in a losing lane, like if you're like an Ezreal or something like that. It gives you a ton of extra gold to get through. You know, usually in the laning phase, you can pick up an extra 300 to 500 gold easily. And just for comparison, you know, if you pick up 500 gold, you know, it's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of probably like 25 minions or so extra. So even if you're down like 10 minions in the laning phase, which Kayle will be down a lot of times in the laning phase, that makes up for it by like 25. And people are still all over the place on the builds, but I think that something like similar to like a Gensu's rate and plus Bork is the way to go. A lot of people are doing Nashers. I mean, this does help you out with your abilities, so that's another way to go. But I think Gensu's second is definitely the place to be. Now, these people are losing a lot, as you can see recently, but she does have a 55% win rate at high elos. So it looks like a lot of people still aren't on the Bork train. They're just opting for the Nashers plus Gensu's. I ran all the numbers on this in the last patch notes video. This was a little bit less, but it does give you the cooldown reduction, and it gives you more burst damage with your ability power. So it's going to offer a lot less sustained damage, and it doesn't give you sustained in lane. But if you do go for Klepto, you are going to be getting those extra potions, which is nice. Another thing that another interaction that a lot of people aren't aware of that I talked about in the last patch notes video as well, that I tested out, is if you do get a potion of skill or an elixir of skill or whatever it's called, and it levels you up, you can actually get to your final form a lot earlier. So if you get one elixir of skill on your way to level 16, and you can, you know, pop your final transformation at level 15, that'll, you know, hugely influence your power spike by like an additional 3 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes of farming, because getting from 15 to 16 is a lot. I don't know exactly how many minion waves of experience that is, but it's several. So that can be a very big deal as well. So a lot of people are going Klepto. They're going Gensu second, almost always. I still think that Blade is pretty good in there as well, but you can also go Nashers. And if you get to third item, then I think that Wit's End is pretty good too. So like right here, phones, you know, a lot of people are still kind of testing a lot of this stuff out. But this guy's got like the ticket of what I usually would recommend, which is Blather and King into Gensu's. Then after that, I don't know about Infinity Edge after that. I might be going a little hardcore. I might get a Wit's End or maybe grab the Nashers around there. But I think that's the way to go. If you're totally stomping people, you can go Gunblade early for the burst damage, but I still think the on-hit build is better. But either way, Kayle's still going to be really strong. They're trying to nerf her on this patch, but I think they actually ended up buffing on this patch, so we'll see. But definitely take Klepto for the laning phase. It helps you out a ton. Even if you don't get that elixir of skill, it still gives you the gold that you need to power up and get those items, and it gives you the sustain because you can take biscuits and you can get extra potions during the laning phase. So I think it's really strong. Pretty easy to proc with her E. Okay, this is a pretty large, like, they nerfed Neeko really hard in the middle of last patch. Like, this was a massive hit to her attack speed. Now, that does matter, where they take off, like, I think they knocked it down, like, it used to give 3 attack speed per level or something, and they took it down to, like, 1.5. That is kind of significant. And they also hit her AD, and the big one was they knocked 25% of the damage off of her on hit. So that was what took a lot of the power out of her Blather and King Gensu's build. But now they're changing this. No longer procs twice in a row at very high attack speed. So I'm not sure exactly what that means. They said it was a bug. So if this is why she was doing, you know, insane damage when she... I don't even know what very high attack speed means. Is that like, you know, 200% attack speed? Is that 100% attack speed? We don't know. But presumably this was part of her power, like in the really late game, is that she could theoretically proc this twice and maybe even 3 times in a row if you include the Gensu proc. So I don't know how that works, but I still think she's going to be in a fairly rough place. I think she had about a 50% win rate. I think bot lane was her best position. At one point, she had a 56% win rate, and she lost like 6 or 7% off of those nerfs. So I think she's okay. I haven't seen that many Neekos at Platinum and lower where you play it, and you're like, oh my god, that's insane. You know, most of the time. Certainly not more insane than something like, you know, a Vayne or a Draven or a Lucian or some other champs that are also really powerful in bot lane. So she's okay. I mean, this is like a backhanded, minor buff and what could be a huge nerf. I just don't know the numbers on that. Okay, Ornn has been in a pretty bad place, I believe, in the top lane. I think he's one of the worst, at least win percentage type of champs from what I remember. Kayle is still really far up there. Yeah, pretty bad, pretty bad. I mean, tanks in general aren't amazing in the top lane, but you got to remember, just sometimes the tiniest of nudges can make them good in pro play, especially. So they have to be very careful with this stuff. Okay, so they give a little quality of life off the Q. They said they did this before, but it didn't change it. It's okay. I don't think it's a huge deal. If you're charging towards a pillar, it won't despawn on you, so that's nice. Bellow's Breath, they're taking down to 10 seconds. I'm glad that this has some kind of scaling, because most people level up Bellow's Breath first, and I think that's incorrect because the scaling is just not that great on it most of the time, or at least previously it wasn't. And I think that you actually wanted to max your Q, or at least get 3 points in Q in the laning phase, because you got a lot more benefit, a lot more damage out of it, especially early in the game before people have a lot of HP stacking. And then you got lowered cooldown on it. So I think that the Q is actually better to level in the laning phase. But now this might make Bellow's Breath a little bit stronger. So this is good for support Ornn, if people like support Ornn. I still don't think that's an amazing pick, but maybe into some of these tanks out there, maybe it's okay. If you're against a Thresh or a Blitz, maybe Nautilus, people are going to be trying Nautilus out, because if you walk in front of a hook and then do Bellow's Breath, it makes you immovable or whatever, so you can immune to CC. So you can walk up there and take hooks for people, which is nice. The problem is he doesn't really give any presence in the laning phase, or it's very hard to give presence in the laning phase. They have to be standing near a wall. I mean, I guess you can Q, and then if they don't move out of the way, you could combo them with your E. She's a lot better, obviously, against immobile 80 carries. So against things like Jinx, Twitch, stuff like that, you might be able to get some combos on them. But against Ezreal, Lucian, Vayne, all of those, it's going to be really, really hard. And Vayne can actively use that Q against you. So if you don't break it, if you try to Q and then someone tries to walk up and do something, she could, in theory, pin you into that wall. Now, that's not going to happen very often, but it is a potential liability. If you try to Q when a jungler's going into ganker, Lee Sin's getting on top of her or whatever, and you try to Q and she flashes it and condemns the Lee Sin into your wall, I could see stuff like that happening. Once again, not all the time, rare, but that is a thing. So the main story here is I think this mostly helps bot lane Ornn. I still think he's going to have a lot of tough matchups top lane. I mean, Galio kind of came out of nowhere off of some very what I thought were minor changes at the time to his kit, 3 or 4 patches ago. People figured out Galio could be good. That's sort of a different story, though, because he has an AoE stun, and mostly in pro play it's because of his ultimate, because he has macro pressure with his ult, which is really good for split push comps, which I've explained before in terms of Tahm Kench and why Tom's really strong too. So Galio's, a lot of it is because it's macro and it's very team fight oriented. People have discovered that that's really, really good to have on his support. So he does have really good teamfight presence with his ult. He doesn't have the same level of macro presence. So we'll see. I don't think it's going to matter that much, but it could nudge, him up maybe 0.5% or something in terms of support, bot lane play. I don't expect to see him top. It's possible if we see a lot more tanks coming top that he's okay into other tanks, but I think there are better tank on tank fighters in the top lane. Okay, Urgot is one of the marquee changes on this one. They're changing a ton about this guy. He's the new Rise, or the new Azir, the champion that gets reworked 6 times every year. Looks like how they might be going with him, but they're giving him a lot of mana. So Urgot has been pretty bad lately, but I'm okay with that because he was obscenely good for a really long time as well. So he is bottom of the barrel here. But once again, it's only been 1 or 2 patches when he was the best or one of the best top laners for 8 months. So I don't know if they had to bounce him back this fast, but I think this is probably a huge buff. We'll see. So let's go through it. It's 40 mana, extra mana regen. This is nice because they made his Q, which he usually maxed out first. They made it 10 more mana per cast. So this will give you effectively 4 more Qs in the laning phase early on, so that's good. Extra mana regen growth, I don't think that matters that much. The flat mana early is a big deal, though. Now, this is a pretty huge one that a lot of people really aren't talking about that much when I've seen people talking about this on the PvE. Is it deals 10% reduced damage to enemies hit in the last 5 seconds. So that's your shotgun legs, basically. Now it does full damage to everybody for every shotgun leg. That's a lot. I mean, if you're hitting multiple people with this, You know, it could be up to 30% extra damage, you know, if you hit him with the third shotgun leg. So that can be quite a lot for all-in situations. Now, this is an interesting change that they're making here. So they're taking your shield off of your W, because your W is just kind of like a jack of all trades, right? It did most of your damage. It also gave you the huge shield. But now they're saying you have to choose. Do you want the shield? Do you want the survivability? Or do you want even more damage, like insane damage? And so I'm not even sure what his ratios are. Let me look at his ratios real quick. I don't want this video to be too long. I'm going to consciously try to do these videos faster. And so usually I'll try to have most of this stuff prepped out. But I think it's like, it doesn't say what the whole thing is. Urgot's other abilities apply purge enemy champions for 5 seconds. Only one enemy champion can be marked at a time. Okay. So if you hit them with something, then they get purged, and then that has him auto-attack. The shield strength is pretty significant, though. Like, losing that shield. But during this time, he does this. Refreshing the mark with each auto-attack. He gains slow resist. His base movement speed is reduced by 125. Deal modified damage against minions. 33% on-hit damage. And cannot critically strike. 36% of your AD. But how many shots does he fire? It's 3.0 attack speed for 4 seconds. So basically it's like, if you have 36 like total AD here, it's like you're doing 118% of your AD if you assume you might have a 1.0 attack speed with some attack speed. Like if you have, you know, a couple of attack speed items. So, you know, ostensibly that's a little bit of extra AD, but you don't have any animations. The interesting thing is the on-hit. It says, this only says it's 33%. 13 attacks. Okay. Basic attacks and do apply lifesteal. It does still apply full Black Cleaver stacks. I believe it applies, each one of those hits applies Conquer. In my testing, each one of those applies Conquer. So that's a huge deal that you can get that Conquer stacked up like almost immediately. Purge will apply Ruinant's Hurricane on every shot at 100% of the listed damage, which is 40% AD physical damage. Wait, hold on, what? On-hit effects by Ruinant's Hurricane are reduced to 33%. Each dealing 40% physical damage. Okay, so you get the full 40% physical damage on hit, but then it's reduced by 33%. So you're effectively dealing, so it does use the bolts, but each one of the bolts only deals 15% on hit. And they can critically strike. That's still 15% extra AD, though. That can hit 3 targets in a team fight if you're purging. So the interesting part, the reason I'm looking at this, is this says that the on-hit is changed. On-hit damage reduction, 66% to... Oh, okay, so it only did 33%. Right, okay, so they worded that weird. Okay, so this is the reduction, not how much damage it actually does. It doesn't... 50% is 50% no matter what. This is actually a huge buff, though, because now it's going to do 50% of the on-hit damage instead of 66%. So now if you get something like Ruinant's Hurricane, it's going to deal 20% total AD per bolt instead of whatever the other number was, 13%. So it's almost like a 50% extra increase. Not quite, but it's close to 50% more on-hit damage off of this. That's pretty huge. If you get something like Hurricanes, it not only does the extra damage to nearby enemies, but like Blade of the Ruined King has always been something I think people have probably thought in terms of Urgot, right? I've always wanted, you know, why not? I just assume it didn't trigger on hit, but it just did a very low amount. But now you can do Blade of the Ruined King on this with him, and that would apply a ton of lifesteal. When your Conqueror is up, then a lot of that's going to get converted over to true damage as well. I'm intrigued. I think that you might go Blade of the Ruined King here. You can use the active to slow people down while you're purging too. Especially this, I mean, so this is the thing that's like under the hood that I don't think a lot of people are going to talk about immediately. Once again, it's going to take them a week and a half to figure it out or whatever. But I think Blade of the Ruined King for real with this, like, if you go Conquer, Conquer is going to trigger almost instantly. You have Blade of the Ruined King, gives you a ton of lifesteal and sustain while you're doing this, and then you get 50% of the on-hit damage. So if somebody has like 2,000 health, and you start hitting them with this, you know, Blade of the Ruined King does 8% of that. So that's 160 to start with. So it's only going to do 50% down to 80 per hit. But when you're firing out like 16 bolts that fast, it's just going to completely shred tanks as well. Blade doesn't fall off as much as other things, as other haunted abilities as well, because... good job, Rory. As other on-hit effects, because... it's based on current health. So that means that, yeah, it's only doing 50%, but because it's only doing 50% of the damage, then that means that each one of those bolts is going to do more damage on top, sort of. You see what I'm saying? Because, like, hi, what are you doing? So, like, if you hit somebody and it's doing max health and they have, you know, 2,000 health. No po. Dada. Yeah, she wants some treats. Did you have fun at daycare today? Were they like, what are you doing, Rory? Why are you showing up so late? I dropped off at daycare at like 1 p.m. All these other kids are taking a nap. The daycare worker was like... But I let her sleep in. She was kind of sick earlier, and I'm not going to argue with her. I mean, if she wants to sleep till noon, I'm going to sleep till noon. You know, so I'm cool with that. I didn't have classes today. It's spring break. Anyways, so I do think that Blade of the Ruined King, definitely worth considering. I don't think it's troll anymore, because that's a huge boost to Blade of the Ruined King. It'll give you extra survivability. So, like... Black Cleaver also triggers almost instantly. So if you have Black Cleaver, Blade of the Ruined King, and Conqueror here, I think that's pretty massive. I think it's pretty massive in terms of overall damage output. You could do cute stuff like Wit's End also if you wanted to. That would do 20 extra damage on hit, which does add up. It would shred all of their magic resist, but you're not doing a lot of magic damage. So probably not Wit's End or Nashers. But I do think that you could even go something like Hurricane, because each one of those little bolts will also apply Blade of the Ruined King, which I think the wording is, I don't know, because like the bolts off of Hurricane will be reduced, but it's the bolts that trigger the Blade of the Ruined King. So because it's the bolts that trigger it, does that count as reduced from you? It might, but even so, like if you're hitting everybody with those bolts, everybody's doing, you know, effectively like 4% of someone's current health off of these bolts that are firing every point something seconds, and they're getting shredded by Black Cleaver, they're getting shredded by Conqueror. That could be really good. Now, the problem is you're going to be really squishy with that build, right? So, of course, that's a major issue. You could even try something like Aftershock on him, but I still think Conqueror is too good to pass up. Cleaver will give you a little bit of extra tankiness. I mean, you can still get a shield off of your Disdain. It's just not going to be as spammable. So anyways, I think that's something to play around with. I think that definitely, at least adding Blade of the Ruined King in there. So Black Cleaver, Blade of the Ruined King, I think will definitely be something worth considering if you want to, you know, like do a ton of damage, especially against other tanks. But after that, we'll see. Hurricane might just be too cute. You know, you might have to go something like a standard Death Dance, you know, a more defensive item, or like GA or something like that. But that's interesting. But yeah, what they're changing this to now is it's free, and you can toggle it, and it's on permanently later on in the game. So it's always up. That's why I'm saying, like, a team fight with the Black Cleaver, Blade of the Ruined King, and Conqueror ticking, like, it's crazy. Conqueror can trigger on multiple targets too, right? Oh, well, it doesn't matter if it triggers, because it buffs you directly. It doesn't debuff them, it buffs you. Right. Yeah. Yes, that's not going to matter. The thing that matters is it's going to convert it to true damage, and it's going to allow you to heal a lot. What's up, dear? Yeah, I got to finish this video first, though. I don't know, 15 minutes, something like that. So, yeah, I think that that's definitely something. I think that's very interesting that this goes to 0 cooldown. So I think this will unequivocally be the thing that you max first, which will, I think, double down on getting that Blade of the Ruined King at some point. I think maybe it's still Cleaver first. It might depend on the matchup, but I think that Blade of the Ruined King plus Cleaver and then Conquer is definitely where you want to be, because this is sick at level 9. Like, this is just permanently up and doesn't cost any mana. It's like so much offense, especially because your shotgun legs now are going to do a ton of extra damage as well. And those shotgun legs, they deal, it's like AoE damage to everybody, right? The next attack on hit in the direction of the ranged loaded gun causes it to fire. Oh, was this... Okay, so this damage was actually reduced by 66% also because it was called on hit, I believe, off of this. So this right here is increasing the damage of his shotgun legs. These changes are increasing the damage of the shotgun legs by like 50% also. That's, I think, right? Because it's on hit, because it says the on hit damage... yeah, and the passive is considered on hit. So that means your passive itself, even if you don't get Blade of the Ruined King, is still going to do a ton of extra damage. 40% to 80%, 2 to 8% of the target's maximum health is physical damage. That's pretty huge. Up to, like, a crazy amount against monsters. And the cooldown goes down to, at level 13, 2.5 seconds. This is going to be up. How many shotgun legs do you have? It's 6, right? So you could hit somebody easily with like 3 of these comfortably in a team fight. And now they're doing like 50% more damage or something when you have your purge active. That's pretty gross. That's a lot. And like this thing now is just not even really that efficient. It's 80 mana at all levels. Like, it's okay. I just don't think people are going to get this anymore. I think you're just going to go Corrosive Charge, max your purge, go Cleaver, Blade of the Ruined King, or maybe Blade into Cleaver. I'm not sure which one would put out more DPS early. Probably Blade of the Ruined King, but Cleaver gives you more survivability. I said it might depend on the matchup, but I think those two will definitely be what you do. And that's pretty huge. That's a lot of extra damage. So I think this is going to increase his offense like enormously, like OP level of offense here, particularly against other tanks. And then this gives you a shield. So I think this will probably be second max. 140 plus 1.5 your bonus attack damage. You're not going to have a ton of bonus attack damage. That's okay, but not amazing. And then 15% of your bonus health. Once again, okay, but damage does a little bit less damage, but it's bonus attack damage. Okay, so early on, pretty good, but later on falls off, and it costs more mana, so they really don't want you to spam it. And it's 14 seconds. So I still think it'll be a second max over E, but the big thing here is going to be Purge. And then probably, yeah, I think you would still max this just because you get the extra, you get a pretty big extra shield. I mean, maybe it's Q. What's the cooldown on Q? It's pretty long also. It doesn't shred armor like it used to. Yeah, I think E max second. And then just leave the Q at like 1 point. I mean, I guess you could get a couple points in the laning phase if you want, but... And then Fear Beyond Death. Now, this is very interesting. 2,500 range gets into, like, snipe territories. This means you could, like, run halfway down the river, and coordinate a gank with, like, your Lissandra or something like that, or your Malzahar, and as soon as they pop their CC on whoever, you can hit them with that Fear Beyond Death from halfway up the river. And finish them off. So that, a lot of people, I've heard a lot of commentators saying, oh, well, who cares? That's not that much. Like, it is a huge deal. 900 range, like, that's almost a screen length. Like, that's really, really far. This is like 2.5 to 3 screen lengths away where you can hit this. So, like I said, I think you could probably hit mid lane from about Baron area with this. So, or you could, influence jungle fights, right? Your junglers are just in a huge fight. You just walk down to Baron area, snipe them out at, like, the blue buff or maybe even the wolves. I don't know if it would quite go to wolves from Baron, but it probably not. But it's really, really far. So, yeah, I think this has a lot of potential for rotations and making plays, especially if you have a really aggressive jungler or you have a mid laner with a lot of CC, and you can walk your way down that river. And you can even do it from so far back, they may not even have it warded to see you. Like, if they have just the river bush warded, the standard bush that's near the lane, then they may not even see you creeping up to throw this. So I think this could be quite nice. And if someone flashes, obviously, if you're a really good shot, you can hit them with this from a long distance. So I think good players, especially like at the pro level, will definitely be able to make great use of this long range. So that's good. And then it goes from total attack damage to bonus attack damage, but it gives you 75 on the house. So I don't know what the breakpoint for that is, but my instinct is a lot stronger in the early game. What is his base attack damage? Okay, so you're basically losing out on 30 attack damage. Let's see, what is it at rank 6? Okay, 80. So you're losing out on 40 damage from base attack damage here. You're losing out on 40 damage, but you're gaining 75. So, yeah, that's a huge boost, I'm pretty sure. Like, 75. So, like, yeah, maybe, like, very late game, if you were building full tank Urgot or something like that, it's not going to be as much damage if you don't get any bonus attack damage. But I think for a large portion of the game, especially in the early to mid game, that's a huge, huge buff on this damage. So, overall, I think this is a massive buff. I think Urgot's going to be OP. I think people are going to find ways to break this. I think I'm already, like, sniffing down the right direction here. I think it's going to be Conqueror, Cleaver, probably Blade of the Ruined King. And I think he's going to do a bazillion damage. The question is, can he still be tanky enough? Can you find runes? I mean, maybe you could take Aftershock instead of Conquer, but I think Conquer is going to be so good on him if they didn't fix that interaction yet, where it basically almost always procs. And if you want to go real hard in the paint for team fights, if you want to go for Black Cleaver plus Blade of the Ruined King plus Hurricane, I think you'll completely delete team fights. So if you combine him with like a Taric or a Lulu or just something else that can protect you and keep you up, if you can afford to go one of those squishier kind of builds, then maybe you could do it. I mean, maybe there's other stuff you could get that would make you tankier. I'm not sure. Maybe just Death's Dance. Maybe just like Black Cleaver, Blade of the Ruined King. Maybe Death's Dance is enough because you're going to have double healing, including Death's Dance heals off of true damage, and you're going to do a lot of true damage from Conquer. So maybe you could go something like Revitalize with this, like Bone Plating plus Revitalize, or I don't know, just something plus Revitalize, because you're going to get 10% healing off of Conqueror, then you're going to get whatever off of Blade of the Ruined King, 8%, and then you're going to get off of Death's Dance, you're going to get additional healing, and that's also off of true damage. So you're going to have like 28% lifesteal. And don't forget, lifesteal, I believe, applies to all physical damage, not just auto attack. So that W does trigger lifesteal off of Urgot. I'm almost positive that it even says it in the text here. Yeah. They're considered basic attacks? What? What? Hold on. Does that mean Ginsu's works with this? There's no way that Ginsu's works with this, right? No way. Why are they considered basic attacks? I thought it just triggered on hit. Why has nobody thought of this before? Even before like this like huge buff to this build. Basic attacks on attack grant this. Would this be worth? Are we looking at Blade of the Ruined King Ginsu's Urgot with this stupid crap? I mean, it says it triggers twice. You don't get any benefit out of ability power, and you don't get any benefit out of attack speed, though. You do get the extra armor pin. So you would be able to trigger... you would be able to trigger Blade of the Ruined King twice. I think it's probably too cute. Even if that interaction works, it's probably, you're just too squishy, and I think it's too cute. But I do think that, maybe, I mean, that's a lot of shots. But I think it's too cute, though. But I do think that Blade of the Ruined, like I said, Cleaver, Blade, Hurricane for, like, maximum AoE teamfight damage, or Death's Dance. So Cleaver, Blade of the Ruined King, Death's Dance. I think could be. I still think that Cleaver, you need that for the survivability, and it's just so good. The armor shred off of it, like being virtually instantaneous, is so good. Yeah, Urgot's back, baby. If you missed him for a couple of patches, you're like, oh man, I wish Urgot, you know, was still oppressing top lane really hard, you know, like he has been the last 10 months. Well, he's back. So that's what I think. That's my final verdict. It's going to be Conquer. It's going to be Cleaver, probably Blade of the Ruined King, and then likely Death's Dance. I think you're going to have like 28% lifesteal off of that, almost permanently up. I think that lifesteal can potentially, especially if you take something like Revitalize, I think that lifesteal could be enough to keep you up, even though you don't have your repeatable shield up as much as you used to. You can still get it once, but that thing is going to be nutty. Could you even take... I'm wondering, like, they're nerfing Overheal on this patch. I think Revitalize... What else would give you extra healing and shielding? I mean, I guess maybe Second Wind or something. I don't know. But I think he's going to be really good. People will figure it out, and I think it's going to have something to do with massive lifesteal plus Conquer plus all those other interactions that we talked about, plus Revitalize will be part of it. Okay. So, yeah, super strong. Aatrox, probably not going to matter. People are still picking him. He has a decent win rate. I'm still seeing him in pro play, even after all the nerfs. 46 in solo queue. 46 in pro. I mean, maybe people should get off of playing him at this point. I don't know. People still like him. He's okay. I don't recommend him for solo queue. I think that he has been nerfed a lot, but I have seen him, like, in pro play still perform pretty well, so we'll see. Okay, Caitlyn is another major one that I want to talk about and give you the scoop here. I think that Caitlyn's going to be really strong after this buff and the nerf to Ezreal. So we'll talk about the nerf to Ezreal here in a second. Basically, you can't do double tier anymore, which is what I've been saying for like 8 months. Just don't let him do the double tier build, and then he's probably a lot more he's a lot easier to balance. But this is actually a pretty big deal because like this spike at 50 extra damage at level 6 is a lot. Like that's a lot of extra damage when people are probably only going to have like maybe 800 health or something. That's a big deal, and this is on such a low cooldown. And don't forget that they gave her a buff a few patches ago to make her snipe like 3,500 or something. I haven't seen that many Caitlyns using that, but once again, kind of like Urgot, you can run halfway up the river, go to about Dragon, and then snipe middle. And so I think you can have a lot of macro pressure with that, and particularly for pro play, I think that could be really, really good. Even in solo queue, if people wake up and macro a little bit more, which is asking a lot of times, but if they do, that's really strong. I mean, 3,500 is ludicrous. Like, Urgot's 2,500 is far, but 3,500, you can almost just hit him from bot lane with that, just not even leave the lane. I don't think it's quite that far, but, like, it's pretty ridiculous. Like, what's the range on Redemption? Let me see here. Because that is something that I've used a lot, so I can kind of get a sense if I remember what the... I think Redemption's like 3,500, right? She's Elmoing. What is the range? Am I just blind? Target 5,500 range. Okay. Okay, so that's not quite as far as I anticipated. So like with Redemption from bot lane, I think you can be about like where the bush is in the bot lane in the river and throw it in mid lane. Throw it in the middle of mid lane. So 4,500 would probably be closer to the Dragon Pit area. So you might have to be like closer to Pixel Bush, but I think somewhere between like Dragon and Pixel you could do it. It's still really, really far. I think that you can still influence fights from quite a long ways away. So that's one major thing. Also, Caitlyn doesn't need that much help to be oppressive in the laning phase. So why we haven't seen much Caitlyn lately, and I've got a new build for you as well, and I'll talk about this in my 80 carry tier list. A couple of reasons. Number one is she scales terribly with attack speed. So they changed that a long time ago about her, and her headshot no longer triggers off a Hurricane, which they changed back in like Season 7. So she has really, really low base attack speed. Right, so look at this. It's only 0.56. Most of the 80 carries in the game will have somewhere in the neighborhood of like 0.67 or something like that. So if you look like... Vayne's going to have one of the higher ones, but we'll look at her as well. So she's going to have 0.65. And it's going to go up a little bit over time, so plus 0 to 0.56. But she's going to have way, way worse early on in the game. And this is really important because this is the number... considered to be okay, so this is bonus attack speed and not base. This does not affect her base at all. Okay, so what this means is that if you have this, and let's say that you get 100% bonus attack speed, right? Then that's going to give you an extra 56% attack speed because it's based on whatever your base is. It's 100% of whatever your base is. So if you're something like Vayne and you get 100% bonus attack speed, she's going to get 66% extra attack speed off of that, right? And so that's a lot of a huge differential in stats, right? That's like, you know, basically Vayne is going to be gaining like not quite 20% more, but pretty close to 1/5. It's pretty close to 1/5, 20% more benefit, more gold value out of attack speed items than someone like Caitlyn does. And that's why people say Caitlyn has a terrible mid game, because she has such low base attack speed that she scales so terribly with Zeal items. So she's so strong when she gets that Infinity Edge, but then when she starts getting those Zeal items, she's actually really weak with the Zeal items because she's mostly a burst damage champion. She's almost like a Draven that just like does auto attacks and takes a little bit more skill to land your stuff, right? You have to actually hit your Qs, you have to trap people and things like that. And she does burst damage like Draven. So she's supposed to be played as a heavy pressure laner that lands a lot of auto attacks and has some abilities that do a lot of burst damage, okay? So she's not a Jinx. She's not supposed to sit there and just like spam, like right click on somebody and they disappear at 3 items, right? She has to be a lot more technical and really choose her fights. And that's why Caitlyn is deceptively one of the hardest AD carries in the game to play. Because a lot of people pick her and just say, oh, she's got really high attack range, and they just sit there and farm, and then they just go even and farm, but then, you know, the Vayne has 2 items, Caitlyn has 2 items, and she gets completely run over just trying to right-click the Vayne. And it's like, oh, you know, Caitlyn sucks. It's like, no, you suck. You should have been applying a lot more pressure. So she's a high-tempo champ. You have to take towers early. You have to pressure them out. You have to make them miss CS, because if you're going even, you're losing. Okay, but she's very, very oppressive at high elo and in pro play because laning phase matters so much. If you zone someone out and you go up 30 CS and you get the first tower, you're in a huge advantage, right? And that means you can go around, and they know how to snowball in pro games, at least in theory, where you would go around, grab all the dragons, start grabbing other towers, start invading the enemy jungle, getting your deep wards in. It just becomes very, very difficult to come back. So that's why Caitlyn was like the dominant AD carry for a large part of Season 7. So she has been largely kind of supplanted by Ezreal in a weird way because Ezreal outranges her with his Qs later on in the game. He has such extreme poke damage, you just can't really ever engage on him. And so that makes him a superior sieger late game. So Caitlyn had been the superior sieger before because you just drop your trap line and, you know, just go up and you have such a long auto attack range, you can just siege towers down. People aren't really sieging that much, though. They're sieging some, but it's a lot more about objectives, vision control, and rotations now. And so that made Ezreal really a superior person. But now that Ezreal's getting nerfed, that might create a space for Caitlyn. And if Caitlyn comes in, that means, in theory, you might see enchanters move back into the pro meta a little bit. They are nerfing the minion dematerializer as well, which does hurt tanks' supports disproportionately compared to a lot of other roles. So maybe. But, like, if we see a Caitlyn, if we start seeing her come back into pro play, which is possible, I'm not saying it's probable, but it's possible, after the nerf to Ezreal and a couple of other changes, then you could see a return of something like a Nami or a Karma, or maybe to a lesser extent a Lulu. Lulu's not fantastic with Caitlyn. She's okay. But I think that, like, Nami is on the cusp of being very good and very viable for pro play. She has a lot of CC. She applies a ton of pressure in the laning phase. So some lanes that really want to go for a high-pressure stat, like or a high-pressure strat in pro play, and want to draw attention down to the bot lane to force the jungler to come down there because they have superior solo laners, could start using this. So people who don't necessarily have to win through bot lane, people who have a really strong mid laner and top laner, but their bot lane is kind of whatever. Like, you can just auto push into tower, force the jungler to come down there with like a Caitlyn Nami lane, get good vision, force the jungler to come down there, and get more alone time for your top laner to dominate. So I think that, you know, especially some Korean teams that could execute this really well, that have a really strong top laner, and they want to try to win through top, I think this could be a viable strategy. So we'll see if it catches on in solo queue. I do think, however, there is a possibility with Caitlyn that a lot of people aren't doing. Another reason that Caitlyn is not so good right now is because her base attack speed is so low, then a lot of the best runes that most AD carries take aren't really that great on her. Most notably, Lethal Tempo is something that a lot of people are going right now. And she's pretty terrible with Lethal Tempo, so you never ever want to go lethal on her. Press the Attack is another one that people go, once again, pretty bad on that too because she has to land 3 auto attacks. That's not how she trades. She trades like, you know, 1 hit every now and then, you know, maybe 1 or 2 hits, and she's looking for headshots. She's looking for those traps and nets and things like that. So most people are going to go, you know, Press the Attacker, Lethal Tempo. Alacrity also not amazing on her because attack speed is a lot less valuable on her than it is other champions. And then Coup de Grace is okay. You know, she does ability damage. That's nice. But what about Klepto? What about Klepto? So I always bring in, and this is something that a lot of people aren't really thinking about, but if you consider her a lot more of kind of like a burst mage in the bot lane who has 650 attack range, by the way, don't forget that, then Klepto can start making a lot of sense, right? Like this is on not a super long cooldown. It's okay. It's on a 10-second cooldown. So you can use this. It has a really high AD ratio, so it's very good poke. It's very good wave clear. It's really easy to hit them under tower too because they're not going to hit you back if they're pushing a tower and you have 650 attack range. So you can try to harass with the Piltover Peacemaker. You know, get a couple of auto attacks in there, get your Klepto procs going. Yordle Snap Trap, I would have to test this out in game, which I haven't done, but I believe if you set a trap down, that counts as casting an ability, which in theory would allow you to use your Klepto procs again. So, you know, it does take a while to store these traps, especially if you're not leveling this up early. That was one of the big nerfs a long time ago, is they lowered the trap duration and they lowered the recharge rate on the traps. But it is pretty cheap mana-wise to put these traps down. So you could drop a trap. So you could walk up, you know, auto attack under tower, Piltover Peacemaker, see if you hit him, auto a couple more times, drop a trap, auto a couple more times, and then you could even try to see if you want to harass with the net. The net is kind of on the expensive side. Usually you want to save this. But at a minimum in the laning phase, I think you'd be able to proc Klepto pretty reliably. You get those 2 auto attacks in at least every 8 to 10 seconds if you're leveling your Q first. And I think you would still want to level your Q first. There are some metas where leveling the snap trap makes sense because if they step on these traps, you get a ton of extra headshot damage, like one-shot territory. And if you're going for a lot of AD, which is something I'm going to talk about here in just a second, then this actually could be worthwhile. She has really, really high AD ratios. Really high AD ratios. And attack speed is terrible on her. So what could that mean? Infinity Edge? Essence Reaver. I know it's going to sound crazy to a lot of people, but attack speed is just such a pile of trash on her. Honestly, it really is. And she has such insane AD ratios. 170% on this. That can be AoE. This thing right here, 100% of your bonus attack damage plus 240 base, plus up here is an additional 100% of your total AD bonus damage, plus the extra crit, 125%. So, like, if you have this trap maxed out, you're hitting them for 240 plus 100% bonus attack damage plus 125% total attack damage. So that's like 225%. It's even stronger than that because one of them's total attack damage. And it can crit. Like, all that bonus damage, I don't believe crits. But the normal part of the attack, I believe, can crit. So that is massive. That's so... I mean, you're talking like headshots are going to do like 1,000 damage or something if you have 2 80 items and it crits. Like, it's a ton, a metric ton of damage. It is a lot. So that'd give you a lot more harassment, one-shot potential if someone steps on your trap, if you max the traps. But I don't know. Maxing this is still pretty good. It does lower the cooldown on this a lot, especially if you want to try the Klepto build. You can spam this a lot more. The mana does go up quite a bit, though. This mana does not go up. And this also gives you more traps, and it gets down to like a 12-second cooldown. So you just have traps everywhere for days, and they stay up for a really, really long time. And so if you're landing your traps consistently... The traps are actually not quite as much damage, but similar. Like, this doesn't proc headshot. So don't forget, this isn't just the 100% AD. It's all of this as well. So it's like the 225% AD. So if you're consistently, like, they're stepping on your traps, then maybe you do buff up the Yordle Snap Trap. But they did buff Essence Reaver fairly recently. They gave it 5 extra AD. You'd get 20% cooldown reduction. So if you're thinking of her as, like, basically... like a burst ranged mage, AD mage of sorts, which I think is the best way to think of her, who's heavy harass early game. You know, having 2 different BF sword items is just going to make you almost one-shot people early on. 20% cooldown reduction is also going to, you know, lower this. So you're going to be able to spam these while you're sieging. You're going to be able to just slam those traps down. Your net's going to be up more often. Your ult's going to be up more often. And you auto-attack so much that you're going to replenish a lot of mana off your Essence Reaver. And the big kicker is it's AD plus crit. That's exactly what she wants, is AD plus crit, because the attack speed is just trash. Now, yes, I am aware that Rapid Fire is a really nice interaction with her, right? So you might still have to get Rapid Fire in there. You'd get Rapid Fire in this build after, I think you'd go Infinity Edge, then Essence Reaver, then Rapid Fire, or maybe Essence, then Infinity. I think you still have to get Infinity first on her just because it has such a great modifier with her headshot. But I just think that just immediately going into double or triple Zeal item is a mistake because you're just not getting any AD, and she has such huge AD ratios, and she has such terrible scaling with attack speed. Like, you really want to be one-shotting people, so I think that going double AD items might make sense. Or doing a build if you have to have your rapid fire early because it is such a great interaction. You do get the extra range that gives her like 800 range, which is really nice for making sure that you get people with those headshots for the poke damage. But I think that you could go something like Infinity Edge, Rapid Fire, and then Essence Reaver kind of later in the game if you want to. But I think there's some room to explore with that people really haven't explored. I think she could be a good Klepto user just because it's almost guaranteed you can get those Klepto procs, right? Every time you press Q, get 2 auto attacks for Kleptos. You lay a trap down, 2 auto attacks for Klepto. That's going to give you the mana to keep harassing. It's going to give you the healing, the sustain with the potions. So I would say it'll give you similar healing to Fleet if you're landing a lot of these Klepto procs because you're going to be getting a lot of potions you can cast, right? It'll also allow you to take Biscuits, which will give you even more harassment. You can take Minion Dematerializer. I think that's in the same row as Biscuits, and it just got nerfed. So you might want to get Biscuits instead. You can get free boots off of it. You could even get Cosmic Insight, probably not, but you can get the potion thing or whatever, the potion duration thing if you want to do that. So I think there are a lot of options there that you could potentially get with her. And then you could even as a secondary, I mean, yeah, you could go into, you know, just get something like Gathering Storm for late game, but just go early game, just double down. Just go Taste of Blood and like Ravenous Hunter or something like that, because you're throwing the Q down the minion wave will do a lot of healing with Ravenous Hunter. And then I believe, I'm not sure, but I believe this would count as ability damage because it's bonus physical damage caused by an ability. I have to double check on that, but I think that you would heal with Ravenous Hunter off of that. I know you would heal off of Peacemaker for Ravenous, but I think the Snap Trap damage and I believe the headshot damage would heal off of Ravenous. I'd have to go look at a Reddit, as I'll have to research that for my 80 carry video, but I think that's possible. That would give you a lot of sustain. Fleet Footwork's kind of garbage. You only get it just because there's nothing better to get. It gives you a little bit of sustain in the lane, but I think you'll have way more sustain with this. You'll have Ravenous, you'll have Taste of Blood, and you'll get all the potions off of Klepto. You'll have Biscuits. It's just sustain for years in the laning phase with this, and you can just trade, and they're not going to be able to hit you back most of the time, especially if they don't have an enchanter support. So I think this doubles down on just saying, look, I'm going to go really hard in the laning phase. I'm going to pressure the crap out of you, take all your plates, and then just rotate around the map and just accelerate through the mid-game with my Infinity Edge first, then immediately BF Sword right after that, keep the power going, you know, turn it into Essence Reaver, and then third item, Rapid Fire Cannon. So I know that sounds silly, you know, to an extent, but I just think that just trying to scale for late, trying to go for those 4 Zeal items just takes too long on Caitlyn. Just she has a terrible mid-game, and I think you can press through the mid-game if you get Klepto for the extra gold, and if you get the sustain to confidently apply a lot more pressure in the laning phase. So we'll see how it goes. I don't know if everyone's going to figure that out or go for all of that. People are doing the Klepto Draven now. People thought the Klepto Draven was crazy too, but everyone's like, hey, you know, Draven doesn't really have a good keystone. He procs Klepto really easily. He scales really well in the early game with a lot of high pressure in the laning phase, gets a lot of sustain off of Biscuits, gets extra potions for sustain, gets a ton of extra gold so he can keep his foot on their throat so they never get out of the laning phase. Caitlyn's kind of the same thing, just a higher skill cap Draven, I think. But Draven is pretty high skill cap too, but Caitlyn is, like, really good Caitlyn play is very, very rare to see. I'll say I see way more, like, highly effective Dravens than Caitlyn, and I don't think it's all because his kit is way better. I think it is better right now, but I think that Caitlyn just don't play her properly. But anyway, so I think Caitlyn might be back. If people start trying out that build, I think it could be oppressive, but we'll see. Okay, Gnar, this, you know, you'll get to wall up twice while you're transformed probably instead of just once. I don't really know his level up, like if he levels this up first or second. I don't really know Gnar's builds that well. We'll see. I mean, I think Gnar's not in a terrible place right now. I don't think this is going to change him that much. I think the meta is just kind of rough for him. I think there are just a lot of other champions up there that can kind of perform a similar sort of harassment role. I think Kennen, for example, right now is somebody that goes like Klepto, abuses Klepto in the top lane, and can apply that early pressure but have even better split pushing. Or even something like Neeko maybe now. I don't know, Gnar's okay, but especially in solo queue, it requires a lot of coordination to make sure you're going to teleport in at the exact right time whenever you're about to Mega Gnar. So yeah, I just don't think he's going to be that great for solo queue. I think there are better split pushers. This is a pretty big deal for Hecarim. 10% extra damage per Rampage stack. I think it stacks twice, so that means in team fights you were losing like 20% damage. So Hecarim's already pretty good, I think. Isn't he like 50%? He might even be a little bit higher than 50% in the jungle. Maybe not. Yeah, he's almost dead even at 50%. So, yeah, I think he'll go up maybe a percentage, maybe even 2 off of this. I think he could be pretty powerful at this one. So, Hecarim's thing is he just like his items, his first couple of items are really awkward because he has to get Cinder Hulk and then he gets Trinity Force, and those like really have almost no synergy with each other. So, Trinity Force is very, very strong with his with how much he can spam his Q, and he does a lot of on-hit damage with that. But it's just like really awkward because he's not getting a lot of health for Cinder Hulk, and it's just really weird. It's really weird. But you know, once he gets the Cinder Hulk plus Trinity, and then starts getting defensive items. Once he gets like one defensive item with that, either Dead Man's Plate or Spirit Visage or something like that, then I think he can be very, very strong in the mid game. In the late game, his damage does fall off. But especially if you can get a couple of kills and accelerate to that Trinity Force, you can just close out the game before they even have a chance to figure out what's going on. So yeah, kind of risky, very snowball-y pick, excellent ganks if you take advantage of him with Predator in the early game. He can be great. Brushmaker, a little bit more responsive with attacks, probably not going to matter. And Ivern's still okay in the jungle, but I don't think this is going to move the needle on him that much. Jayce getting nerfed primarily for pro play, so he's losing, what, 16 health, a little bit extra health growth per level. I don't think it's going to matter. I think that people who still want him are going to still play him. I don't like him in solo queue that much because he's a tempo champ. You do have to snowball really hard. But in pro play, for people that, you know, once again, want to play around bot lane or mid lane or something, they just want like guaranteed, like, this guy's going to win 1v1 top lane, so we don't have to really mess with him that much. I think Jayce is a good option. Okay. Leblanc got her AP ratio changed down to a 0.3, and remember this triggers twice a lot of times, so I think that's good. This champion's really obnoxious. I think the ultimate change they need to make to her is just she can't mimic her W. Like, I don't know why it's taken so long to figure this out. It just gives her too much mobility. Like, she can still have the assassination. I don't mind that. I just mind that she can assassinate someone from like 2,000 units away with virtually no risk. I think that's the big problem. Come more from mobility and skill shots rather than point-click button. I mean, I agree with that, but I mean, I guess like her mobility is the cool part of her kit. I mean, I guess you could make it to where she is not going to do enough damage to kill you unless she procs 2 parts of her chains. I think that would be a fair way to do it as well if they want to keep her mobility. But anyways, we'll see. I think she'll still be good with people that are good with LeBlanc, but this will definitely take her down a little bit. Okay, Nautilus. This is actually a pretty good change to Nautilus. 3.5 extra armor early on is nice, and then staggering blow. 6 seconds at all ranks. I think this is best for supports because you're going to level up a lot lower than other people, and that base armor matters a ton more. I don't think we're going to see him in top lane. I think there are going to be too many champs that are good against tanks in the top, especially like new Urgot. So I think he can just get bullied out and blown up top lane. He just doesn't have the damage. He doesn't have a lot of like percentage health stuff or true damage or just like these other tank busting things that a lot of the more modern tanks have. So I don't think we'll see him top lane. I think he goes out of mana too quick to jungle. So that kind of leaves with bot lane. And I think he is pretty good in the bot lane, particularly against immobile champions, you know, like a Jinx where it's really easy to hit those fat hooks, like a Jinx. Maybe a Caitlyn, Twitch, that type of stuff. Ezreal is kind of going out of style, maybe a little bit on this patch. We'll see. So that'll be very nice. He's very good, especially if the enemy team is not going to build a lot of stopwatches or Zhonya's Hourglasses, that type of stuff, because they can stop his ult with that. But he's good. Has a really huge hitbox on his Q. His ult is point click on a fairly low cooldown. Knocks up not only the primary target, but a bunch of secondary targets as well. Has pretty good wave clear with his E. But yeah, ultimately, I think he'll be pretty good in the bot lane. Thresh recently got nerfed as well, so I mean, you could see him coming up to tier 2. Like, I don't know if I'd pick him over Leona in a lot of cases against enchanters. He's still going to have a really hard time against peeler tanks. So against things like Tahm Kench, Braum, Galio, stuff like that, it's going to be kind of rough. So we're not going to see him probably in pro play. But in solo queue, I think you could definitely see him. I think he's a much easier to play Thresh. And I think he is a lot better potentially at team fighting than Thresh. He's a lot less risky than Thresh. You want keys, you want wallet, you want all the stuff. Here, why don't you have this, Rory? Yeah, it's a box. Can you figure it out? She says, Dad, you're teasing me. She says, fix it. Fix it. Fix it. Okay, go ahead and lace her up. I'll be done in a second. Okay, so Rek'Sai, she's still going to be in about the same position. Like, super late game isn't going to matter that much. I don't think, I mean, 20 seconds is a lot, but she's primarily an early game, like, domination snowball champion. So she's already, like, not that great late game anyway, so that's okay. And lowering the bonus attack damage, you know, once again, she has really high base damages anyways. So will this matter? Sure. But I think she'll still probably be pretty strong. We'll see. Shen, this is nice. I mean, it's double the on-hit damage, so it's 30 extra damage with your Twilight Assault early on. Sorry, 15 extra damage early on. Rory. So that could definitely add up over time. We'll see. I do think that Shen, with some of the changes to the meta over the last few patches, I've been saying that I think Shen could return to top lane because he is actually a pretty decent split pusher later on in the game as well. He can't keep up with all the fighters, but he can hang in there for a lot longer than most tanks. Like, he can hang in there for the first, like, 3 items or something. He's pretty strong, and he has really good macro pressure, so we'll see. Will this mean support Shen is back? Maybe situationally as a peeler tank. But I don't expect him to make a huge splash. But it might be on people's radar a little bit more. Shen is an interesting case because he can actually ward pretty deep and escape with a Shadow Dash over walls, especially because Rakan's been nerfed so much that maybe, like, if you're looking for that type of thing, it could be good. So we'll see. He'll probably go up a little bit in win rate, a little bit in priority, but not too much. Sylas, still going to be strong, but thank God they're nerfing this heal. This is super frustrating, part of his kit. It has a lower ratio, and it's only 175 instead of 200%. I don't know the exact numbers on this, but I think he's still going to be good in a lot of iterations. This is just going to drop his heal by maybe, if you go in an AP ratio, what would that be? Like 10 and then 25% extra something, I don't know, like 20 or 30 maybe on the heal. So if he's healing for like 400, that's just a random number. If he's healing for like 400, like in the mid to late game off of Kingslayer, then maybe he heals for 370 or something. So it could matter. If Nunu's any sort of indication, Nunu had a super high win rate. Nunu is at like 55% win rate. They nerfed his heal significantly, like 40 on his main thing that he levels. And it only ended up dropping him like 0.5%. So he's still really good. So I think that by that logic, which is not exactly the same thing, but I still think Sylas will be about where he is. Really good in like high level play, and then just kind of mediocre in low level play. It just depends on how well you use his ult. But this makes him a lot less safe, especially if you're not going for the tank build. Okay, Trundle, probably not going to matter. Trundle exists in a meta where tanks are completely dominant and where there just aren't a lot of other good solutions to tanks, especially in like a Scion meta where his pillar can block Scion's ult. And that's just not the meta we're in right now. You're seeing very few tanks, especially in solo queue. Like, we're not seeing Sejuani back. Historically, he's been a strong counter to things like Scion, Sejuani, Cho'Gath, stuff like that, and we're just not seeing a lot of that. So if that stuff comes back, we might see it more, but I just don't think it's going to matter. I mean, you get an extra 10% attack speed at early levels with your W, which is what you max second, and it's no extra attack speed at the top end. So I don't think it's going to matter. Now, this is a very big deal, I think, for Xayah. This is 30% extra attack speed on her Deadly Plumage, and historically you have maxed this second, although I think now, potentially, and and I'll talk about this in my 80 carry video, you could max this first, and you could go for an Infinity Edge Essence Reaver combo. Similar to what I talked about with Caitlyn, Xayah, you know, attack speed is good on Xayah, but most of her damage comes from her abilities. It comes from Blade Caller, right? Her E, when she draws all those feathers back in, scales off of crit, and it scales off of your raw AD a lot. And so she benefits very, very heavily from having a lot of raw AD. So I think that could be a build with her, and I think the fact that you're getting this extra attack speed off of this, if you're maxing this first, is going to still make it feel comfortable to get this instead of a Zeal item, because you're getting like the 30% attack speed off of a Zeal item, right? Basically, off of this, but you no longer have to go that ratty Zeal item. You can go something that's awesome, that has a lot of AD and crit, so you can blow people up quickly. And ultimately, I think that is what she'll end up doing. So we'll see. I'll talk about it more in the 80 carry video, but I don't want this video to be too much longer. I know I said I was going to make it shorter, and now here it is. It's going to be like an hour and 15. But yeah, so stay tuned for that 80 carry tier list. I'll walk you through the runes. I'll walk you through the items, but I think that people will switch to W max, and then Infinity Edge Essence Reaver will be the way to go. And I do think she could be back. If she comes back, then Rakan could come back as well, which I know will please a lot of people, but we'll see. Sleepy Trouble Bubble, extra 2-second cooldown. No, people max this second, so in the mid game, it'll probably be like a 3-second cooldown. The slow, I don't think matters that much. Maybe a little bit, but you're going to get stunned anyways, or whatever they call it, rooted. I think it's stunned. I think she'll still be strong, because a lot of it's just her Q spam. She doesn't even have to hit you with bubbles. Like, she can just blow you up with Qs. So I think she's going to be about the same priority. She might lose 0.5% maybe, but overall I think she'll still be strong. Okay, Tear of the Goddess. Basically just for Ezreal. You can't get Tear of the Goddess. You can't get Archangels plus Mirror Mana. So that build's going to be gone. However, there are still other builds that are good on him. People might still just go back to the Mirror Mana plus Blatherin King build, or plus the Hextech build or whatever. So I think people will be able to find another build that's probably good on him. So it's going to be way weaker in the super late game when you get both things stacked. So in like the 25 to 30 minute mark, it's going to be a lot weaker. But if he does have to get Blatherin King third, then he is going to be stronger around like that 20 to 30 minute mark when he completes that. So I still think he'll be pretty good, but he just won't be as super oppressive in the very late game. I expect him to go down probably maybe 1 or 2% off of this, although he doesn't have a really high win rate anyways, because a lot of games in solo queue are kind of like blown out by that point anyways. And he's just really hard to play. So he's at 48%. I wouldn't be surprised to see him down at 47, maybe 46.5%. Pro play priority, we'll see. I still think he's going to be pretty strong, but once again, you might see something like Caitlyn creep back up a little bit more. You might see Tristana has been creeping up in priority a bit more. We'll talk about that in the 80 carry tier list, but I think he might move out a little bit, but we'll still see him. So I don't think he's going to be complete gutter tier, but I think that his late game is definitely going to be nerfed, but his mid game might indirectly be buffed a little bit, because it'll force people to go for a mid game item instead of a second tier. So we'll see how that plays out. Minion Dematerializer, nerf to supports. You can only use it 3 times. The major reason that people would get this as support is you would get this on Relic Shield users, and it would ensure that you get a perfectly safe cannon so that they can't come up and pressure you off of the cannon as easily when you're trying to last hit it. So it's a really nice quality of life. Also allows you to get priority in lane to rotate, or to like go challenge dragons or scuttles or things like that. So I think people still get it. I think it, you know, it just won't be as strong as it was. So we'll see. In pro play, it's going to matter a lot more, because there's a lot more coordination with getting lane priority to contest dragon, or to set up vision, or get scuttles, or all that kind of stuff. So we'll see. It's also very good, I think, if you hold some of these in game to clear out like super minions and things like that. I think it can clear supers. I'm not sure. People used to get it all the time to clear out Banner of Command, and then people realized, hey, that's a really good rune, and they kept it anyways, even after they got rid of Banner of Command. So we'll see how. I don't think it's going to be huge meta shift. I don't think everyone's going to automatically not play tanks anymore in the bot lane. Like I said, with Caitlyn specifically, you might see some enchanters come back, but we'll see if Caitlyn comes on. But Overheal, this is going to hurt the Blatherin King Rusher, so Vayne, Draven, Lucian. Well, Draven doesn't rush Blade of the Ruined King, but he does rush Bloodthirster. So a lot of the top end AD carries are going to get hit a little bit. So it's going to hurt, or it's going to help champions like Caitlyn, like Tristana, like Xayah, champs that don't get early lifesteal. So they'll edge up a little bit, although I don't think this is a massive deal. It's going to hurt Draven the most, but he's still going to be really, really powerful anyways, especially with that Klepto build. Okay, gold bounties, basically it's less for farming. So basically what it was before is if you were up about 10 minions on somebody, you would get a 50 gold bounty. Now it's if you're up like maybe 18 minions or so, you'll get a 50 gold bounty. So slight difference there, 30% longer to wait. But, you know, if you're still going up by like 60 gold or something, you're going to acquire like 150, 200 gold bounty. So that's the biggest thing. Support item gold now contributes even more to the bounty system. I don't think it's going to matter that much. If you have multiple like support gold items on your team, it could matter. So if there are multiple people going like Frost Fangs or Relic Shields or something around the map, it could influence bounties. But overall, not going to matter. They are changing the visualization to only show what the bounty is and not the total gold that you're getting off of somebody to stop confusing people on the scoreboard. So there's that as far as a visual thing, if you didn't know that. I think the big one is, though, like, power farmers are going to have a slightly less gold bounty. It's really going to matter most in, like, pro and challenger play, but it's probably not going to make a huge... It's just going to be more of a feels good for people that they don't have as big of a gold bounty. I know a lot of YouTubers are blowing this out of proportion. Why am I getting these huge bounties for farming so much? But in reality, it really did not make that much of a deal. I mean, was the game really made or, like, decided by the 100 or 150 gold bounty you had for being up 50 CS on your opponent? If you're up 50 CS on your opponent, you're probably winning anyways. You know, let's be honest. So, I don't know. I don't think this is a huge deal for most people, but, like, really top-end players, maybe it'll get them to stop complaining about it. You know, it might change throughout an entire game where a team has 10,000 gold. Maybe there will be, like, 300 less bounty gold handed out or something like that. So, I don't think it's a huge deal. But anyways, it's nice. It's going to allow the team that's ahead to snowball a little bit harder because there's not going to be as much bounty for shutting them down if they get ahead on farm. But it's mostly just kind of a placebo, I think, for a lot of people in most ELO brackets. Ability stuff, probably not going to matter from what I saw. This is just spell hit ability, so if you're getting Leandries, it's going to proc more reliably on certain things. That's kind of the big one, but a lot of people aren't getting Leandries and stuff. Okay, for ranked, I've talked about this a ton on the channel. If you are under diamond, the rank changes do not matter at all for what they did. It's only diamond people, so it's probably like, I don't know, 5 to 10 people that watch my channel. But anyways, it's if you are challenger, you go down to master, 0 LP, grandmaster, challenger, master. If you're diamond, then you lose 1 division and go down a little bit. And they got rid of ranked positional ranking as far as LP goes, but they still have positional matchmaking. So if you get off-rolled as jungle and you never play jungle, you will be put into a much lower ranked game. So they still have that, like what they currently had. It matches you based on how good you are at that current role, but it does not have LP. You'll still gain and lose LP only under 1 LP number. So it's just going to be more confusing under the hood stuff. So now there's not only hidden MMR that nobody can see, but there are 5 different MMRs for each one of your positions that are influencing who you're getting matchmade against. So I think it's going to personally cause a lot more confusion. And really, people were crying so much about this. Once again, super top-end players where it really wasn't influencing that many of their games, but they were pointing out, like, really, like, hyperbolic situations where you had people that were exploiting the system. And, you know, all of these challenger players are complaining, oh, there are all these weak players in these games now. There's no way I can win. It's like, dude, they're going to be weak on the enemy team too. And really, is it that much different? Like, how many people exploited their way into Masters? Like, honestly, there's probably like 300 or 400 people out of like 10 million that play in the U.S. that play ranked or whatever that exploited their way. You know, like, how many of those people did? Like 20, 10, 20, something like that, maybe? How about, you know, they should have just punished the people that were abusing the system, and they could figure that out by going through the data. So I wish they did that. This was such a PR disaster. There were so many high elo players that were saying, like, oh, Challenger's unplayable, Masters is unplayable, us 300 people that play this, there's no way we can play each other. So I don't know. I think this was pretty silly. I kind of liked positional ranks because it allowed me to play off-roll on stream sometimes just for fun, for some variety, but I can't do that anymore. So I don't know. And the thing is, all the people that watch these challengers, you know, people that watch, you know, top-end streamers that are complaining about this, they're like, oh, well, my silver game's the same way. It's unplayable because, like, of these, you know, cheesers and exploiters and stuff. I'm like, no, it's not, man. It's really not. People are just using that as an excuse to not climb to where they think they should be in the rank in the season. So people find any excuse for that. But anyway, so hopping off my soapbox now. So yeah, it's not going to influence 99.9% of players, but for the 0.1 that are, you know, diamond and higher, for the 1%, I guess, that are diamond or higher, this will influence, you know, they'll have a very minor reset. No one else is getting reset. If you're platinum 1, you stay platinum 1. If you're silver 2, you stay silver 2. You know, it's only if you are basically diamond 3 and above are you going to drop at all. And it's only nominally for those people, just because there were probably like 20 exploiters that got to masters that shouldn't have gotten there. So anyways, okay, so doesn't matter for most people. Frame rate stuff, minion tracker, lever buster is now a little bit nicer, so it doesn't ban people as quickly if you have a terrible connection. I don't like this. I don't think you should be playing ranked if you have a terrible connection. It won't ban you. I've lagged out before, and I've got lever busted probably 2 or 3 times in my lifetime, so not a lot. But I don't know. Anyways, it takes regional connectivity into account, so now if you play in a laggy region, like, you can leave more. I don't know. I don't like these. I think they should be stricter with lever buster and banning people than they already are, but they decided to go nicer with it. Once again, for the vast majority of people, I don't think it's going to matter. I don't think people are automatically going to start leaving every game, and it's going to cause chaos. I think it'll be about the same for most people. Bug fixes, none that I noticed that would be too impactful. So anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much for tuning in. Sorry, it was kind of a longer video here. My wife is like, we need to go walking here. Baby's freaking out. But yeah, I think Kayle actually got buffed on this one. Neeko, probably a stronger nerf than people realize. Urgot, probably overpowered. Caitlyn could potentially be very strong, especially if people think about that build I was mentioning. And the other ones, yeah. So my Xayah is going to be a bit stronger. Anyways, that's going to be it. Be sure to check out the 80 carry tier list because there were a lot of 80 carries that were changed on this. I'll talk about it, the items, what I think the priority will be. That'll come out probably tomorrow. Stay tuned for that. I'll have the support tier list out as well. If you enjoy this content, be sure to like and subscribe. Stop by the stream sometime starting at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'd love to have you. And I'll see you next time. Have a great day.